Here, I will be choosing to analyze Jackson-Sun articles, as this is a major historical newspaper in the community. I pay for a subscription to the Jackson-Sun online, which gives me unlimited access to their articles. In the description is a link to all of the articles referenced here so that you may read them in their entirety. The Jackson-Madison County School Systems, Past, Present, and Future. At this point, we know that the Jackson-Madison County School System was sued in 1990 over discrimination, segregation, and refusal to maintain and fund the schools. We know that West High School was abolished in 1992 and absorbed into Southside. We know that Jackson Central Mary was the first school to integrate in 1964. Through protest and legislation, segregation was being addressed. One of the major statements was the Education Improvement Act of 1992. This included the Basic Education Program that would outline a template for school budgets across Tennessee. These were the agreements that were made at the time of that lawsuit, which lasted from 1960 to 2010. Amendments were made in 1990 and in 2000. The lawsuit was dropped in 2010 by a majority African American school board in spite of the objections made by two of the original plaintiffs. You can find a full reading of this public lawsuit at my video on Monroe versus Jackson-Madison County School Systems. Although this lawsuit jargons back and forth between Jackson-Madison County School Systems met the basic criteria required of them, and the numbers don't necessarily show that that's true, and whether Jackson-Madison County School Systems had met those criteria is up for debate. Ultimately, the decision made was that the accountability needed to be left in the hands of local authority, such as the school board itself, the county commission, and the Jackson-Madison County citizens. So what has Jackson-Madison County School Systems done since they are no longer shackled by the state? Well, we know that when West High closed, it left West Bemis Middle and West Elementary in Denmark. Here is West Bemis Middle fighting to remain in existence in 2015. And then in 2015, there was the actual closing of Jackson Central Mary High. Please watch the story of Jackson Central Mary to fully understand the scope of this decision. What are the local authorities doing for the schools? Well, let's look at the budget. As part of the Monroe versus Jackson-Madison County School Systems agreements, the city levied a sales tax to pay for school improvements. Everything in this process was based off of prior decisions and agreements. For example, this tax was modeled after the 1966 tax increase, meaning that half of the tax went to the school and half went to the city. Over time, that is built to $12 million extra dollars a year, largely paid by tourists visiting the city. Until, in 2018, the city decided that all of the money was theirs and none of these agreements were legally binding. Jackson Mayor Jerry Gist sought the opinions of City Attorney Lewis Cobb and former Nashville Mayor Bill Purcell, who both agreed it was not a legally binding contract and the city could redirect that revenue back to its general fund. Brenda Kay Monroe-Moses, still trying to fight the good fight, helped the county attempt to sue the city for the over $12 million that should have gone to the schools. You might ask, why should that money go to the schools? Well, School Superintendent Eric Jones says that the school system has a broad economic impact on the community. We have jobs that just can't be filled in our community, and eventually, if those jobs continue to be unfilled, employers will go to where they can be filled. Industry leaders have to know where they can go to find people to work. If they look and they don't see that opportunity in the largest school system in West Tennessee outside of Memphis, there's going to be implications for all of us. So if that's how the superintendent feels, then what does the school budget look like now? Well, here we are, first in 2018, politician and representative of District 3, Tommy Gobble, claims to the Jackson Sun that the Jackson-Madison County school system receives 65% of the city budget. So let's break that down. The 65% he's referring to comes from the fact that in the past fiscal year, $126.6 million was spent on Jackson-Madison County schools out of a total budget of $195.7 million. However, this school allocation includes all the money from both the state and federal governments, $51.9 million and $28.3 million respectively. The state and federal governments use the county coffers as a conduit through which their funds are dispersed. The county commission is neither raising nor controlling these funds. Instead, the county commission acts more like a judiciary trustee in that the money simply passes through the county's books. Even describing the commission's recent approval of $103.3 million operating budget deserves more explanation. Of that amount, $53 million is state money. After ignoring a few minor revenue sources, local taxes designated for the operation of Jackson-Madison County school system comes to only $47 million, barely 20% of the county's total budget. So now we're living in Vision 2020. That brings us up to date, May 30th, 2020. Current Superintendent Ray Washington proposed $10 million in budget cuts to the school system. These cuts come at the request of the county commission. As one board member says, it's just another issue of the county bullying the school board. So what do we stand to lose? The proposal eliminates 74 positions, cutting the number of educational assistants almost in half. There could be changes in bus seating, classroom sizes, and technology improvements. More cuts could be to crossing guards, more educational assistants, instructional materials, athletics, and extracurricular activities. Property taxes will be reduced, but considering that only about 52% of Jackson's population own their own homes, I'm sure that's really going to help the city itself. West Tennessee Healthcare has traditionally provided $166,000 towards funding school nurses. However, it will no longer make that contribution. Other potential cuts include $1.2 million in non-personal reductions, including social studies and science books, math and reading intervention materials, career and technical education books and equipment, more than $150,000 in reduction in professional development, over $100,000 reduction in maintenance supplies and materials. Local authorities express their concern. If the trajectory of our school system does not change over the next 5 years, Jackson as we know it will start to look significantly different. If we don't get our school system turned around, this community is going to die. Jackson-Madison County schools have dropped to 94 out of 95 counties in funding, despite being one of the largest and most complex in the state. In the 10 years since the state relinquished control to the city, we have become more segregated, underfunded, and the school system is in a dire situation. Instead of building schools and helping students succeed, we are closing schools and funding a new jail. Instead of pulling in brilliant students from across the United States to live here, we are taking in imprisoned citizens from across the state. Instead of being a capital of Tennessee's brightest, we have been reduced to Tennessee's largest cage. So, does this have to do with segregation? In the beginning, I wasn't intending to make that correlation. But as I've read, it seems that all of this spirals back to the 1990 decision and the city's resentment of it. In referring to the 1990 agreement, very few resources actually address the true reasons for the agreement, which was systemic racism. The requirements listed by the state, in my opinion, have not been met. The legal document says that with full confidence, the system in place would not revert back to bankrupting its own people. I don't think that the state needs to step back in to tell the school boards what to do, though. In fact, I agree with the statement that this problem is best addressed through local control and political accountability.